Hi everybody, welcome to my studio. This is Steve Fleming. Tonight's video, what we're going to be talking about is scraping rocks using a scraping tool, scraping weeds using a round blade knife, trying to scrape a little bit out of the trees in order to get a feeling of the tree trunks in dark foliage, and then when the dark foliage is a little bit too pasty, I'm going to talk about how you can do some lifts by throwing a little bit of splatter of water on the trees and then lifting it off with a paper towel. So let's get to it. So anyways, I'm just going to paint the trees and the rocks and see how this goes. I'm going to put the paint down fairly thick with a little bit of water. I need to have enough paint or pigment, enough pigment on the paper to get a quality amount of paint so there is enough for me to do the scraping. If you do a real watery mix, you don't have enough paint to do the scraping, and then it dries too quickly and it's not doing what we want. So don't be afraid to put the paint down kind of thick. Use a lot of pigment. I'm using ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna. This is 140 pound rough paper. And I'm going to put this up and just really work on a quick passage across the trees. I'm not painting any sort of specific tree. I'm just painting a sort of generalization impression of pine trees. Every pine tree I ever saw on the coast. And this is kind of nice. I like the looks of that. So I'm going to watch this. I'm going to put the paint down and I'm going to watch it really closely. And as soon as it begins to lose its glisten, which the glisten, as you can see it from the side, is a very shiny surface. As soon as it loses that glisten, I have to then begin to scrape. I can't wait too long. Once it loses the glisten, I have that little bit of time. If I get to it at the right time, I have a minute probably to do a lot of scraping. And it's a nice effect. Try to get a little variety in here. Make sure a nice range of color from sort of a middle value. Come back in now and put in some darker values. A little bit of rich pigment. It's a little bit of almost pure burnt sienna. Alright, and I want a lot of texture out on the edge, right by the edge where the sky comes in. Where it touches the sky, or where the rubber meets the road, as I would say, that's where you want to have your best edge. And notice how I'm painting with the side of my brush like this, as opposed to a lot of the point of my brush, which would make that mark. I'm trying to get a nice push into the paper. Alright, so there is the tree. I'm going to put a little bit of warmth down here at the bottom. A little bit of olive green. And now I'm in good shape. So I'm going to take my scraper and my knife. I've lost the glisten on this. I'm going to pull a little bit of the scraper. I'll explain this scraper in just a second. This is a scraper that costs about 99 cents. And not that I'm supposed to be plugging places. I'm not getting any sort of ad money from anybody, but the point is you can buy it on Amazon. It's called a super scraper and it costs 99 cents. So the next time you have an order going into Amazon for anything, buy yourself a super scraper and you can get these nice little textural marks which say tree trunk against dark foliage. And then I take the point of this knife, I put in a few little scrapes, and that gives me that sort of look there. If I come back right now, take a little bit of dark pigment, and how you get dark is using less water. You can't really make a good convincing dark by running wash after wash after wash of middle value. It doesn't work that way. And come right out here to the edge of this and just put a little bit of detail right now. Just a little bit. And that works pretty well. I'm going to leave it alone. Because now I'm going to move to the rocks. Now the silhouette of the rocks is pretty interesting. It drops down, comes up, drops down, goes way wide here, then drops down. So all of these angles on this rock form a nice silhouette. If you make your rocks look like a quarter of a moon shape, it's not a very interesting rock. Or if it goes brick shape, brick shape, brick shape, brick shape, brick shape, say that real fast a bunch of times, it's going to drive you crazy. But the fact is, if you make it a nice shape, to work against this light sky, your painting is going to be much more successful than if you start with a very boring shape. So I'm going to take a lot of this sort of gray tone that I've mixed for the tree, take it off of the palette with this natural sponge. I'm going to mix up a tawny color, and the tawny color is going to be mixed from raw sienna. There's a little raw sienna, a little bit of cobalt violet, and a little bit of olive green, just to sort of say there's a little vegetation on them. And I'm going to paint with the side of my brush and run this paint across here fairly quickly. This is going to be a big scrape we need to do. You want to cover this fast. You want to come right up against that edge. Make sure you're using a big enough brush to get this happen. Vary the color a little bit. Over here in this shadow, I'm making it a little cooler. Out in the sunny areas, I'm going to make it a little warmer. Make sure you cover it quickly, or else it will dry, and the scrape is just like in the trees. It's not going to work. Alright? Cool it off. Keep going pretty quickly. Don't paint each individual rock. Paint from the top to here down to the bottom edge, and come back and try to fix inside the shape a little bit. Catch up with yourself here. Put a little variety in them. These are rocks. The more variety you have on them, the better they're going to look. Don't worry about each crazy piece. I put a little violet there, and that's sort of the shape of these rocks up against this background. Put a little more green in here. Now I'm looking at it from the side, and I want to make sure that I don't lose the opportunity to scrape. If I do that, it's going to be just a big flat blob of color, and that's not going to be what you want. So here we go. I'm going to scrape. As soon as I get a little bit of dark accents in here, I'm going to do the scrape. Alright, so I take this flat, I lay it down like I'm icing a cake, and I pull this down like that. Get a nice piece. Now the tendency for people is this. They do this pretty well, and then they go, I said don't make them look like a brick, then they go brick, 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 too many marks. Make big, broad, scrapey pieces, as opposed to little bitty ones which break it up too much. Alright, you get a couple nice looking indications of rocks, and that's basically all you're shooting for, is that. And if you miss it, timing wise, you're going to have to try to let it dry, then come back and put a darker wash on top of it, and then scrape that. But you don't get too many opportunities to come back. You don't get to do that. The painting will not forgive you too many times if you don't think in advance. So I've got the trees, I've got the rocks. Then I'm going to take this little round brush, and all I'm going to do now is take the brush and pull some of this scrape stuff down and get rid of a little of that sort of beady thing that's sitting there. See a little dark edge, I'm not crazy about that. Just get rid of a few of those scrape marks. Alright, then take a little bit of the color that's sitting on the palette, add a little bit of texture to the rocks. Now this is tricky. I'm going to splatter on this, but remember my board is going like this. So when I splatter, the paint's going to go down. If your board is flat on the table or just a little bit elevated, when you splatter, it goes way out that way and goes across your sky. So you don't want that. I'm just going to scrape a little, splatter a little bit here. And I'll watch up here. And if it happens, try to be Johnny on the spot and wipe them off with a paper towel. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of green down here, and the green's just another opportunity to show another type of scrape, which is going to be the scrape for some weeds. Weeds are one of the 5 or 6, well, there's probably about 8 things you have to contend with when you're going to paint. One is, if you're a landscape painter, sooner or later you have to deal with weeds. I mean, a lot of people say, well, I only want to paint pretty grass. Well, that's fine. But landscape is covered in weeds. So weeds are not manicured yards. They are not golf, well, there's a lot of weeds on golf courses, but they're not like your front yard. But sometimes my front yard looks like a weed pile, so what the heck. So I'm going to put this green in, a little bit of it in the bottom, just to say there is a little bit of foliage down here. Put a little bit of blue into it. That first color was phthalo yellow green. I added a little bit of new gamboge. I'm adding a little bit of ultramarine blue. Add a little bit of a brown color. All right, there's the weeds at the bottom. I'm going to take this knife. I'm going to pull a few scrapes. Now, a few is not 500, but it doesn't have to be just 3. It can be, you know, enough to make it entertaining. But remember, when you're scraping, you don't want every scrape to be exactly the same mark, the same angle, the same length, the same spacing. You want to make sure that you're getting a nice feeling of rhythm to this and variety. So you have the trees that had some scrapes, you've scraped a little bit off the rocks, you've scraped a little bit on the bottom, and then what I'd like you to think about is this is a rigger or a script liner. They're really narrow brushes. This allows you to paint a little bit of fine detail work on some of these passages. So when I talk about having a rigger or something like that, this is the type of brush I'm talking about. And I flash this across really fast. I don't go slow and paint deliberately each mark like this. I'm trying to paint a rhythm marks up into the rocks, across the rocks. Get a lot of things going on. Just pull some of this piece up into the rocks. There's a little bit of interlocking between them, which is a good thing. And so what starts off is a fairly simple little statement of weeds at the bottom, rocks in the middle, trees at the top with just a little bit of detail. A little bit. You don't need much. You begin to get a little bit of character to this, and this brush will help you do that. You can also come back up into the trees and put a little bit of detail on this. But remember, if you're going to do this, you want to make these marks count. They shouldn't be little bitty, tender little marks. You want them to really feel like that's a tree trunk. Put something in that really matters. Don't put them in if you're going to be too conservative with it. You'll put a nice mark, something really good, so it has a feeling to it. I got those pieces a little dark. I'm having a little bit of trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of the background color in. I think I can do that. And then I'm going to show you how to lift some color out of those trees, which would be worth the price of admission. Alright, so I'm just going to run a little bit of a wash for the sky and go right ahead and paint that little hill in the background. I'm going to put a little bit of water up here, just nothing much, just a little bit of this water. Take a little bit of cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue. And I'm just going to run this up. I'm just going to have it be like that, no big deal. I'm just going to have a little bit of sky. It's kind of green. Sadly, I had a little bit of green in the water. Probably should have cleaned my water. Or had a caddy, a water caddy. I could have somebody around as my water caddy, and he'd be like bringing me water. But I don't think that's happening. So there's a little bit of sky. Cut right down to the top of the rocks. Yep, I know I have it. Here it is. A little bit of a paper towel. Take a little of that bead off there. And there's a little bit of expressive sky. Then I'm going to put a little piece of hill in. Just a little bit of green, a little bit of blue. Right up next to that piece of the sky. Bring it over like that. I'm going to keep it kind of distant, so I don't want it to be too dark. Make it a nice cool green. This is just olive green mixed with cobalt green. Alright, so now take your brush and just pull it up next to this with the side of it, and you get this nice textural mark, which is that dry brush I talk about. I'm just taking the brush sideways and doing that. Come back up here real quick, put a little bit more form on this background hill, just a little. There we go. And then just let a little bit of a brush across this water, and that indicates that there might be a little reflection out there. Alright, so it gives us a little bit of distance, it gives us something to look at out here, and I promised you that I would show you how you make this piece a little lighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little water on my fingertips and I'm going to throw it into this dark spot. I'm going to take this paper towel and I'm going to lift a little of the color off, which is going to lighten it back a little bit. But you have to keep rolling your paper towel a little bit, because if you don't, you're going to pick up the paint and push it back into the color that where you're lifting it, and it's going to make it even darker. So you got to remember that if you're going to lift something, you cannot keep using the same piece of the paper towel every time. You have to be turning it, coming up with a different edge, and this has lightened it appreciably, okay? And so if you want to carry that here a little bit, you can throw it in here. Take a little color off of that. Take it here. And what that does is it just gives you a little bit of texture in the dark areas. And that little texture is sometimes all you need to make these paintings really work out really well. And I think that's pretty darn nice to know. You can also, which is one last thing I'm going to show you, because I said I was going to talk to you about scrapes and I was going to talk to you about lifts. So I can take this little bitty fine brush and I'm just going to take it here and I'm going to run it right across this piece. And I'm going to make a couple little lines. Then I'm going to take this paper towel, I'm going to lift that out, and you see how the line showed up? By doing that, I'm getting another type of mark in here, and I'm creating a lot of density inside this shape. I get that to happen. I can come here and I can, well, I don't think it's going to matter, but I'll show you can do it right here. So your lifts, you can make a lift in the paper using a paper towel onto a damp area. You can do scrapes with one of these scrapers, or you can do scrapes using a round bladed knife. And what that does, it creates a lot of nice texture, and if you learn to use those and get the timing right, you can get nice planes and nice form to your paintings. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like me at facebook.com/SteveFlemingArtist. Also, don't forget my blog. Every day I'm putting up new lessons, new paintings, and new demonstrations. Thanks again.